I suppose we better start then, shall we? Live is on. Thank you, Walid. Okay, then we shall begin, and then anyone else who wants to join us can. So, good evening, everybody. Can I get a good evening from everybody?
Good
Good
evening.
evening.
Good evening.
They're like, you don't normally talk to me. So, welcome to Tales and Tunes, which is our spoken word and music open mic and anything anyone really wants to share in front of a camera. We will start, as we always do, with a bit of interactive storytelling from me. If you want to make suggestions for that, you can stick them in the chat or you can shout them out. And then we'll probably go around in the order we arrived. And you're really welcome to share any tales or any tunes that you have. Is there anything else I need to say? I don't think there is. Shall we begin then? Yeah? Awesome. So we're going to start. Let's do a bit of extreme storytelling. I am going to create a story on the spot from your ideas. So the first thing I would like to know before I create the story is who you would like the story to be about, who you would like to be the hero of this story, I guess. The
A
hero, the
donkey.
heroine, a
A donkey.
donkey. Lovely. So this story is about a donkey. Very nice. All right. And then let's decide what does this donkey want? What does he want more than anything in the world? Might be a physical thing, might be a metaphorical thing. I don't know. What does
What's
our donkey want?
breakfast?
He wants breakfast. Good call. All right. So we've got a donkey that wants breakfast. Any particular kind of breakfast, Mike?
Yeah, carrots.
Carrots for his breakfast.
Yes.
Lovely. Okay, that makes sense. And then just one more thing I need to know is who or what might get in the way of our donkey getting his carrots for breakfast?
Somebody not having any.
Someone who hasn't, it's like somebody's not got them, somebody's taken them. Who might
Well,
that person be?
Slugs.
someone who's stolen them.
Did you say slugs, Mer?
Ginormous slugs.
Ginormous slugs. That's a good baddie, isn't it? Lovely. Okay, so how this works is I shall begin telling the story, and when I need an idea, I shall ask you guys, and you can shout it out. You can put it in the chat, however you'd like to tell me, and then I shall incorporate that idea and carry on. So here we go. Once upon a time, there was a donkey. And this donkey lived alternately in his field and in his stable. Oh, I feel like our donkey needs a name. What should we call our donkey? Give him a name.
Merlin.
Merlin the donkey. Lovely. So Merlin the donkey spent his days going to and from his stable and to and from his field, and he'd chew the grass. And the thing was, his owner was not very good at getting up in the morning. And every time Merlin got up in the morning, he thought, oh, do you know what I just fancy for breakfast? Some carrots. And he'd go out and he'd do his best Eeyoring. Can we have some Eeyores ready? 1, 2, 3. Eeyore! Eeyore! But his owner did not even speak donkey. His owner would stay in bed and go, oh, leave me alone, Merlin. I just want to sleep. So Merlin decided that he needed to have carrots for his breakfast. He would have to go out and find his own carrots. If his owner wasn't going to get him carrots, he was going to go and find them himself. Now, if you were a donkey who had been deprived of carrots for your breakfast all this time, and you wanted to go out and find some carrots for your breakfast, where would be the first place you would go? Where would you look first?
Next door farmer.
Exactly. So he looked over next door and he saw there were some other donkeys over there. And he did his donkey get. This is now a donkey galloping. Look, ready? And he galloped and he galloped and he galloped and he galloped and he tried to jump over the fence like this. But he was a donkey and they're not very good at galloping. So he tried again. He galloped, he galloped, he galloped. He tried to jump. Still no good. He thought, I'm going to find my way around. So he went all along and he found a fence and then he found a friend. And he said to the donkey in the other field, what's the donkey in the other field called? What should we call him? So I just don't get confused between my donkeys.
Arthur.
Arthur, there we go. Thank you for keeping it on the same vein, Mike. He said to his friend Arthur, he said, Arthur, I need to come across because I need some carrots for my breakfast. Can you let me in? And Arthur, who was a little bit more accomplished than Merlin, managed to get his teeth and open like the bolt on the gate because that gate was no good. And he got through into his field. And Merlin explained to Arthur his predicament. He said, Merlin, every morning I get up and I say, Eeyore! Join in with me. Here we go. Eeyore! Eeyore! And every morning my owner, he doesn't get up and he won't give me any carrots. And I'm really desperate for some carrots. And Arthur said, well, I'd love to help you out, Merlin, but unfortunately, I haven't had any carrots for weeks. I don't know what's happened. Every morning I get up and I go, eeyore, eeyore, and still, like, my owner comes out, but I get oats, I get hay, but I don't get any carrots. I don't even know what happened to the carrots. Merlin said, well, that is a problem. We are going to have to find out where all of the carrots have gone. If I don't have carrots and you don't have carrots, then where on earth could the carrots be? So Arthur and Merlin decided to head out into the world together to try find where all of the carrots might be. Now, lovelies and gentlemen, where would you look first if all the carrots in the world seemed to be missing?
Lincolnshire.
Lincolnshire. Thought perhaps they're all in Lincolnshire. We haven't actually established where these donkeys are. I'm going to assume they're in Suffolk. It's not too far to go. So they said, the county that provides all of the carrots in the whole of England, that is Lincolnshire, and that is where we need to go. So off went Arthur and Merlin. Arthur opened the gate like he did before and somehow got out, and then opened Merlin's gate as well. It's very useful to have a donkey that can open gates. And Arthur and Merlin, they went on down with his Arthur. This one's Merlin. And they went, and they walked all the way from Suffolk, and they all walked all the way through, I'm going to say Cambridgeshire. How good is my geography? And then eventually, somehow, they got to the county of Lincolnshire, and they needed to find whoever was the head carrot grower in Lincolnshire. Who is the head carrot grower in Lincolnshire? Where shall we find that person?
I don't know much. Cleethorpes.
Cleethorpes. They went all the way to Cleethorpes, and they stood in the town square of Cleethorpes, and they said, we need to find the best carrot grower. Of course, they were donkeys, so instead of saying that, they went, eew, eew, eew. Fortunately, there were other donkeys around who understood donkey language and knew that they were looking for the best carrot grower. And suddenly, the village square in Cleethorpes was full of donkeys. And all everyone else could hear was, eew, eew. But the donkeys were saying to the donkeys that come all the way from Suffolk, we've had all the carrots go. We don't know what's happened. Nobody's had any carrots for a week. Somebody must have taken them. They must have gone. And then the oldest and wisest of the donkeys said, I was just eating a carrot. It must have been 3 or 4 months ago now. And I saw in the field next to me, because I'm very lucky, I graze near like a field of carrots, these ginormous slugs. There was an entire army of them. And they came across the whole carrot field and they sucked up all of the carrots. And then one of them had like even a little backpack on, and he went to my farmer's shed and he took all the carrot seeds and they went off into the distance. Well, once the other donkeys had heard that, you can imagine, they were livid. They wanted back their carrot seeds and their carrots, so they knew they had to go and find where the giant slugs were. So if you were a band of donkeys now, led by Arthur and Merlin and then a whole bunch of other donkeys, and you wanted to find out where giant slugs lived, where would you look first for some ginormous slugs? An entire army of them, that is. Where shall we try? Decision. Who knows where the ginormous slugs live?
Under the trees.
Under the trees. So they went all the way through the fields. They went back to the field where the donkey had seen the slugs thing. And they went further on through the fields and further on through the fields until they came to a forest. And in that forest, sure enough, underneath every tree in the forest, there was a ginormous slug. These were not just these tiny slugs. These were massive. These were slugs the size of people. And each of those slugs next to his tree had a huge pile of carrots. And when the donkeys saw them, they said, slugs, you cannot hoard all of the carrots. You are having more than your fair share, and there are no donkeys have had any carrots. For months, we are hungry. We need carrots for our breakfast and ideally our lunch and dinner as well. What will it take for you to give up your carrots? The slug said, we are never giving up our carrots. These carrots are ours, and you can't have them, donkeys. You'll have to find something else to eat, like lettuce or something. But the donkeys were not going to give up that easily. They decided they needed to get past those slugs to get to their carrots. Now, if you were an army of donkeys and you were facing an army of slugs and you wanted to get your carrots, what tactics you think we should try first to get these carrots?
You could use a machine gun.
They said, I know. Bringing violence in to begin with. Arthur and Merlin said, well, here's the thing. It just so happens that we have brought, let me let Omar in, that we have brought with us some weaponry. And they opened up, like, you know how donkeys have their backpacks? So they opened the side, they had some, like, machine guns in there. And the donkey said, we don't have opposable thumbs for this, but I reckon we've got enough hooves here that we can make it work. So they set up their machine gun, and they said to the slugs, If you don't give us back these carrots, we will fire this machine gun at you. And you see, that's where they went wrong. Because if you warn your enemy that you're coming, they just duck. And you see, that's the thing with slugs. They can like morph themselves until they're really flat. So even when the donkeys worked out with all their hooves how to make the machine gun work, and the machine gun went off like this, all of the slugs just ducked. They dodged every single bullet. They were too slimy to even be touched by it. And when the donkeys had run out of bullets, well, the slug said, "Ha ha! See, you can't have the carrots. They belong to us." Well, Arthur and Merlin turned to the rest of their donkeys and they said, there must be something else we can try. Weaponry hasn't worked. What shall we try next? How else do you think we could try and get past these slugs?"
So they all decided to have to piss at the same time.
Okay. Is that gonna work? I'm gonna try it and see what happens to slugs. So I was like, what will that do? I don't know. Let's see. So the donkeys decided, well, if this hasn't worked, we shall use our bodily functions to be able to get. If we all pee, because actually donkey pee smells really bad. If we all pee at the same time, this place will smell so bad that all of you slugs will have to leave. Well, they did. I'm not going to even demonstrate this. You just have to imagine. All the donkeys.
Come on, put your back into it. We want you to demonstrate this. Come on.
Hang on. Okay, so let me get my donkey again. Okay, it's going to have to pee like a dog, all right? So all the donkeys at the same time lifted their eyes, and they all peed all around the forest. But you see, the slugs saw it coming. The slugs took their little pegs and put them on their nose. And they went, "No, even as smelly as your pee is, we are not giving you the carrots." Donkey said, "Oh my goodness, we did all of that for we made that storyteller do that weird donkey peeing mime for absolutely nothing." They said, "Right, it's a story, so it's a rule of 3. This last thing we're going to try is definitely going to work to get those carrots off those slugs. Lovelies and gentle humans, what is going to be our foolproof plan that's going to get those carrots? What are we going to try?"
They created. Oh God.
Go, Mer.
Created some type of diversion.
Good plan. Any ideas for the diversion? What do we think? What would slugs be distracted by?
Music.
There we go. So the donkeys huddled together, making sure this time the slugs didn't hear what they were about to do, because that was pretty much their mistake the last 2 times. And they said, "Look, what nobody expects is a singing donkey. Like all the time we just go, eeyaw, eeyaw. What if we sung in beautiful harmony? They would be so shocked. And when they were frozen like in shock, we could run forward, grab the carrots and run off." So that's exactly what they did. With the slugs saying, "Ha ha, you'll never get our carrots," they all stood in 2 beautiful semicircles and they began singing. They began to sing the most beautiful harmonies that had ever been sung by any voice ever. I couldn't do it justice, so I'm not going to try. And those harmonies drifted into the air, and the slugs were mesmerized. No one had ever sung to them before. It was so beautiful that they lifted up their slug heads and they rocked side to side to the music. And as they did so, the donkeys on the end, that weren't quite as good as sing as the others, crept around and with their mouths grabbed the carrots, as many carrots as they wanted, and they put them in those little donkey pack things. And the rest of the donkeys sung so beautifully that it wasn't long before all the slugs were so mesmerized they fell fast asleep. And as soon as they were asleep, all of the donkeys took all of the carrots and they ran all the way back to Cleethorpes, and then they shared out all the carrots with all of the donkeys. And then Arthur and Merlin went all the way back from Lincolnshire all the way to Suffolk. And when they got there, Arthur and Merlin set out their fair share of the carrots, and they had the finest breakfast of carrots that 2 donkeys had ever had. And there ends my tale. The end. Thank you. That was fun. Lots of singing donkeys. All right. First up, Keith, you were first in. Are you happy to go first?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Lovely. I shall spotlight you. Please give it up for Keith.
No.
You can turn it off once I've turned it on.
I'll turn it off.
There you go.
I like to see people.
Yeah.
Right. Deep down in the depths of hell, the devil was bored. He just fed up, sitting around in the warm fires. He was nice and comfortable, but he was just bored. And so he told 2 of his imps to go up into the earth and to the land of men and women and cause havoc, create a whole mess in the world, and so that the devil could be entertained and laugh at what was happening. And so the 2 demons, the 2 imps, they flew up on the wings of the wind. They were about, maybe 1.5 feet high, and they had a sort of pear-shaped body and a turnip-shaped heads with a pig's snout and horns like a cow. And they had little wings like bats' wings. Their arms hung down with rat's claws at the end, and the same with their legs. And they flew up out of hell and flew across to England. They flew round and round and round, looking for something to cause some havoc, cause some fun. And they came to a place called Chesterfield. And in Chesterfield was a long, tall spire. And they flew round and round and round and round that spire. The Church of St. Mary, All Saints. And they twisted the spire. And so they were so happy, and so was the devil, looking at how they'd caused havoc in Chesterfield. And even today, that tower is still there, that spire is still there, twisted, and some of the locals called it the Devil's Hat. Well, they flew on for miles and miles and miles until they came to the foot of a big hill, where there was a pond at the bottom of it, a small lake. And they climbed up from that lake, up steep hill, through all the houses. And when they came to the top of the hill, on the left-hand side, there was a big castle with big turrets and a big wall all around. But on the right-hand side, there was a big cathedral, Lincoln Cathedral, with 2 big towers with spikes at the top, and in between them there was this arch. And they decided to fly into the arch, into the doorway, and to see what was happening. And when they flew in, there was a beautiful rainbow cloud. It's just beautiful clouds, not clouds, it was rainbow colours. That's what I wanted, colours, as the light was shining through the stained glass windows. And there was a beautiful sense, beautiful smell of incense, because a church service was about to start. And then there's this beautiful singing as the choir began to sing. They flew into the central part of the cathedral, flying around, knocking the hats of some of the ladies, disturbing the hymn books, blowing out the candles, and just causing so much havoc. They flew round and round and round. And then they came down and went to the bishop's throne. The bishop was about to stand up and give a sermon. And just below the sides of the throne, the bishop's long cloak was hanging down, and they hung on to that cloak. And so the bishop couldn't stand up, and he tried to stand up, and eventually he fell over. And the imps, they continued to cause havoc, round and round in the nave, spitting in the corners, causing havoc. But then, out of the holy book, out of the Bible, came the guardian angel with a silver sword and commanded that the imps stop doing what they were doing. They whizzed around, flew around, and one of them flew up right on top of the nave, and the angel pointed its sword at that imp, and he clung to one of the pillars, was very gradually turned to stone. And he sat there with crossed legs with a grin on his face, completely as a stone, completely static. Now the other imp was flying around the bottom of the cathedral, and he flew out from the cathedral trying to get away. And he flew up and he flew round and round and round the top of the cathedral. But he was hoping that maybe his friend might be able to escape, but that was to no avail. And there was a witch flying by on her broomstick, and he hitched a ride on that broomstick, and eventually became a black cat. And so often when you see witches fly across the sky riding on a broomstick, you'll also see them accompanied by a black cat. But back in the cathedral, on the side of that pillar, still sits the Lincoln imp.
Lovely. That's such a great image, isn't it? Of like, I love the twisted spire thing. It's fabulous. Is that like the one? Are there any other myths around why it's like that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you could actually go to the cathedral and find that pillar, and you can see the imp that's set in stone, and it's actually there. It's difficult to see in all the other carvings, but it's actually there.
Ah, so
And the Lincoln
exciting.
football team have adopted it as their symbol, as their motif. But,
Oh, that's
yeah.
lovely. So
but it's a
much
traditional
fun.
Lincolnshire story about the Lincoln imp. Yeah.
It's fabulous. Seem to be all in Lincoln.
So I know it as the impetuous imp, Keith.
Ah, okay.
Is that the same one? Presumably there's only one stone.
Yeah, it's only one there in Cathedral, yeah.
Yeah. So I heard a story about the impetuous. Was it Bishop Hugh of Lincoln
Oh,
who
right.
had turned it into an imp was flying around, and he said, "You're impetuous imp," and he turned
Oh, I
it into a
see.
stone. Yeah.
Yeah, this
I
is the
love
true story, this one is.
Oh, is it? Okay, yeah. Well, I'm from Shropshire, mate. So
where all the true stories come from. Mike, have you got a tale to tell us tonight, my dear?
well, I have, but I'm sat here. That's why I turned it off. I was trying to I haven't quite tuned it up yet because I thought Mia was going to do next.
Mel said she was just going to listen tonight. So.
Oh, she's just listening tonight. Oh,
Yeah.
right, okay. Right, yes, okay. Well, I won't. I was going to play a tune, Justine, but
You can play a tune.
yeah, not on that, can't I? I've been in the conservatory all day. It's out of tune completely.
Honestly, I just got out my guitar to like tune it, and I got to the top E string and just went snap. I was like, different guitar tonight then.
Yeah, no, that's right.
It's the cold weather, isn't it?
Well, I was practicing last night, and the worst place to leave a stringed instrument is where it goes hot and cold and hot and cold, and
Yeah.
you know. So anyway, so no, I'm afraid I wouldn't want to put that if it's being recorded. I
That's
expect we
fair
can,
enough.
right. Yes. Right. We'll do a different one then.
Sounds good to me.
Right. So if
Off
you
you
go
go.
into the Forest of Dean, and in the Forest of Dean, the forest is 200 square miles, and it's between the River Severn and the River Wye, and it's a forest, and it's an ancient forest. It goes back to Roman times and all that types of things. And what goes on in the forest goes on in the forest, and what goes on in the forest sometimes stays in the forest, which is the best way for it. Now, I used to work down there. I used to work for the Forestry Commission. One day, some of the people who were down there said, "Come with us, Mike, and we'll show you something different." And they took me to Godfrey's Hole. Godfrey's Hollow. Now, Godfrey's Hollow isn't named after somebody called Godfrey. Godfrey's Hollow is named after the place where the pagans like to call it because it's God-free. There is no God there at all in any way. And there they sat and told me this story because they told me the story of the imp that used to come out and play a tune. And he used to come out and play a tune on his whistle, of which I have not got to my hand, and I haven't got a nickel harper to my hand. So you'll just have to imagine tonight that it's a tune, and it is the most beautiful tune of all. It is the tune that makes you think of nectar, and the most brilliant thing you've ever had for your breakfast, Justine, like those donkeys that they were having that hadn't had, and Keith, and an all English, whatever is your finest breakfast in the world, Mayor, it's that breakfast 10 times better. And they used to sit there and they used to play this tune, and then he'd come out with a drinking horn. And a drinking horn was a long, long horn with a slight curl off, and he'd just walk round and he'd give everybody a little drink out of the horn. And it was a bit like after you've been cold swimming, you just had a rush of fineness and goodness. And think of the best thing that's ever happened to you in your life, it's your wedding or the birth of a child or whatever it is. It was as good as that. And then the Duke would turn up and he'd stand and say, I am the Duke of Gloucester. Thank you very much for coming. And the little boy, he'd bow and he'd take his little whistle and his little harp, and he'd take his drinking store, and they'd turn round and he'd just disappear. And people got to know that. And it was a place where the Duke himself, he said, well, you know, I don't want everybody to go all the time, but maybe for special occasions. But on Midsummer's Eve, the longest day and the shortest night, that's for me to go. And one day he went down there, and there was a knight from the north. We don't know the knights of the north, who he was or what his name was, but he went along and he experienced this fine evening as the sun went down and the little chap came out with the drinking horn, and he played his tune and he played his harp, and he just sat there and smiled, and everybody felt so fine. And just as the sun was coming up, they left, and they were riding back north, over the River Severn and past the Malverns. And then they turned, and the Knight of the Orth, he slept. As the knight slept, the little horn came out of his coat. And the Duke was furious. He said, what have you done? He said, I needed that horn. I'm getting married in the north, and I'm taking it with me. No, you're not, said the Duke. And there was a fight, and the Duke won. And he took the horn, and he took that Knight of the North, and he put him in his castle at Sudeley, and they went back. And he went back the next day, and he sat there, and he just waited all by himself. He was going to say sorry and give the horn back, but the little boy, the little imp, the little fairy, he didn't come back. He waited for 3 days. Then he went back to his castle, and he found the most beautiful women he could find. And he said, I'm in trouble, I need your help. And he took them there, and there was a choir of women, and they were holding hands. And as they held hands, they sung. And they sung their little hearts out in 4-part harmonies, the best singing that he could find anywhere in his dukedom. And still the little boy didn't come. And he sat there and he cried. This great, tall Norman, strong Duke, he sat and cried. And his wife came, and she said, you know where you have to go and ask. You have to go and see Edric Wilde and Godder. And he nodded, and the next day he took his horses and he took his arm truss, and he came up north. He crossed the River Severn at Bewdley on the old bridge there, and he came across the Clee, and he came up to Shropshire. And just as England meets Wales, about halfway up from the top to the bottom, a little bit to the east, there was Edric Wilde and his wife Godder. Now, Justine, you probably don't know who he is, but this is the time of the conquest. And Edric Wilde, or Wild Edric, he used to roam the Shropshire hills. And when he was a little boy, he used to see lights, they say, in the distance. And he'd come back and talk about the lights in the distance. And one day he came back with a wife. He was just 18 years old. And he walked in, and his father looked at him, and for he too was a duke. He said, what you got there? He said, this is my wife. He said, where did you find her? Oh, there were some lights. I followed the lights and I found a cottage. And in the cottage, there were 7 fairy women. This is the youngest, and this is the one I will marry. And the old Duke shook his head and said, do nothing more. And they put the little girl, the little fairy girl, by the fire. And she sat there for 3 days. And in those 3 days, the old Duke himself, he died. And so Edric himself, he became Duke at that time. And in the end, he turned round to the little girl, and they treated her with nothing but kindness at all. And he said, I need a wife, I'm the Duke. Will you marry me, please? He did it properly, mind. Yeah, he got down on one knee and he had a ring and he said all the proper words and everything else. And she said, well, I don't mind if I do, but you have to go and see my father and my brother first. And the Duke, Edric Wild, went, your father and your brother? Well, one, how do I find them? And two, who are they? And she said, oh, my father's the king of the fairies. My brother, he's the prince of the fairies and now the leader of our army. And you see the tree down there, just to the left. They're all sat down there with the fairy army. And if you'd harmed me in any way, or upset me in any way, well, all I had to do was to stand up and shout, and their army would have come here, and that would have been the end of you, Edric Wild. And Edric Wild went, oh. So he went down and he saw the king of the fairies and he asked permission to marry his daughter, and the king said yes, okay, but you know, as she steps from our world to your world, mortality comes with her. And so that's how they became, and they became married. And in the annuals, the very annuals of our kingdom, of our Mercia, of our England, William I, William the Conqueror, he came to visit her, and he had it written down in that daily diary that she was the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen in any of his realms, and any of his visitors at ever time. So that was Edric Wild, and that was his wife Godda. And the Duke said, yes, I must go and see her, and that's where he went and he visited her. And he walked in, and he told the story just about how I told it to you, about how Godfrey's Hollow, the little fella, and the drinking horn. But he was looking at Edric Wild, Wild Edric, but he was telling Godda. Godda was getting crosser, and crosser and crosser and crosser. And in the end, she stood up and she said, what have you done with that knight? For if you bring him here, he will pay for what he's done. And the Duke said, before I came, we hung him off the bridge at Pershore. We chopped him up into little bits and we put him in the River Avon, and he'd be washed out to sea, and no one would name his name again. No one will find any bits of him again. You have no worries about that, Godda. But what do I do with the horn? And she said, you come with me tomorrow morning and I'll find my brother and my father and we'll find out what to do. So the next morning, as the sun going up, they all jumped on their horses and they all went out to the stone circle. Now there's a stone circle here on the Welsh Marsh that if you ever get to visit while you're here, I'll take you there. It's called Mitchell's Fold. But there's other stone circles and there's a secret one. It's a secret one and it's on private land. And he took her to there. And Godda said, you stand outside with your horn and you wait here. And she walked in with Edric Wild herself, and she walked into the middle of the stone circle. Suddenly a great mist came up around. And then the mist faded again. And in the middle, there was Edric Wild, and there was Godda, and there was the king of the fairies. And Godda looked at her brother. And they spoke for a few minutes, and it was at that moment, at that time, in our time, that Godda knew her father had died, and her mother had died, and it was her brother was the king of the fairies. And then she spoke, and she pointed at the Duke, and the Duke held up the horn. And the king of the fairies walked over to the other side of that circle. Within about that far from each other, their eyes met. But the Duke held the gate. And the king of the fairies looked at him again. And afterwards he said it looked as if someone had gone into his soul, looked into his very heart and touched his heart. And they say from that time on that he'd been touched by the fairies. And he spent more time in the flowers and talking to the trees and standing by the rivers and listening to the birds than he ever did at any other time of his day. And one day he died and they never found his body because he just disappeared. But going back to our story, he held that gaze that day. And in the end, the king, he looked at his sister and he looked at the Duke, and he came back and he sat down and he spoke again, and he spoke for a while. Then the mist came up, and as the mist came down, there was just Godda and Edric Wilde and the stone circle. And Godda came out and she jumped on the horses and they went back to their castle at Bishop's Castle. And she said these things. The little boy, the little fairy boy, he's no longer here anymore. He's died. He's gone in from where we say that he's not with us anymore. He's an ancestor. The horn has disappeared. We don't know where the horn is. You'll have to keep it. And keep the horn. And one day it'll find its way back, I hope. And there's nothing more we can say. But the Duke said, the Duke of Gloucester, he said, yes, there is one more thing to do. I am so sorry that this has happened. And Godda looked at him and said, you didn't need to say it. My brother, the King of the Fairies, knew it. But whether you knew it or not, we're going to find out. So that's the story. It's called Godfrey's Hollow, and it's called the Drinking Horn. And what happened to that drinking horn? Well, it was kept in the castle at Sudeley for a long time. Then there were more wars in this land, and these were in the 1600s, where the royalists and the parliamentarians, they took it. They didn't like things like that. They held it. They smashed everything else in that castle and the churches around and everything else, but they didn't do anything with that one. They took it to the House of Lords in London, and it stayed there for centuries. And around 1830s, 1840s, 1850s, the records disappeared. There used to be a record that a payment was paid by the Duke of Gloucester to have a horn looked after once a year. It was in a little glass cabinet sometime, but that payment stopped as well. And in the end, nobody knew. And I just like to think that it did find its way back, that horn, to where it should be, in Godfrey's Hollow, in the Forest of Dean, in the county of Gloucestershire.
Thank you. That was amazing. It's just like epic, isn't it? All these different stories come together. Ah, lovely. Thank you so much, Mike. That was great. Ah,
Yeah.
Shall we have a tune? Since I actually tuned up my guitar, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I love a tune. It's just I've got an untuned nickel harper here. You know what a nickel harper is?
Yeah, I love them. Oh, Mer doesn't know. Show Mer.
I don't know.
Well, put me on big view. Put me on
Hang on, I'll
big
put
view.
it on big view so you can see it. Hold on. There we go. Spotlight. There you go. There you go.
Wow, that looks pretty cool.
And you
Yeah.
play it. And you play it, Mia. let me. You.
Wow.
Not very. You play it like that,
Yeah.
right? So that's got a bow, and it plays like that. And this bit here is basically a piano, but it's got 16 strings, and every one of them is out of tune just at the moment.
That's the trouble when you got that many strings.
Yeah.
It's bad
Yeah.
enough with 6.
Yeah.
Oh, dear. Yeah, particularly when they've been sit in the cold. Lovely. Oh yeah, you have to tune it up like at some point that we can hear it, because it's such an
Well,
awesome instrument.
I'll make sure I'm a bit more organised. To be fair, I've been cutting up wood over the wood burning stoves with my son-in-law there, and I sat in the chair and I went to sleep. And Lynn said, "Aren't you going to your tunes and things tonight?" So I leapt up, which is why I'm so unorganised. So I do
bless you.
apologise, Justine, for not being organised enough.
It's entirely fine. It's entirely fine. It's good to see the nickel harp. Right. Let me see if I can remember this song. I was going to do one of mine, but I don't think I am going to do. I think I'm going to do, just because it's so ridiculous. I can remember other people's songs better than mine. So, actually, I probably should spotlight myself. Hang on. There we go. Just in case anyone wants me to. Just seeing if the guitar has stayed in tune. Can you hear the guitar? Is the question.
No, I can't.
Can't hear it
You
at all.
need to turn your music.
Yeah, I've got original sound for music. It's on, which is why it's annoying that it's not doing that. Hold on a second. I think what I had to do last time was actually take this off. Hold on. All right, hold on. Can you hear me now? If I can hear you, that's the
I
question.
can hear you speaking.
Okay, let me turn this up. Okay, original sound for musicians. Oh no, original sound for musicians has gone off now. Let's put it on again. All right, let's see. Can
Can you hear it now? There we go. It's very weird that I suddenly have to like have everything on. This is a song from there was a series called Nashville. I don't know if anyone watched it, but it was kind of all about kind of country music. And the amazing thing about it, like as a TV series, was that like all of the music in it was written by these incredible country artists. So there were loads and loads of songs that were amazing in it. But I don't know why, I really like this one because it feels really atmospheric. And I haven't sung it for a long time or played it for a long time, but we'll see how it goes. Here we go. It's called Learning How to Lose You. Last night I left the kitchen singing Folsom Prison Blues. I was up doing the dishes, drinking whiskey like we used to. You were Johnny, I was June, we'd fix it all up with a tune. I was a fool to think that this could be that easy, 'cause baby, I'm still learning how to lose you. Like the kickback from a smoking gun, takes some getting used to, and I can't unpull the trigger. No, I can't make you call. And these ghosts I treat like lovers, they aren't helping much at all. No, I stay up all night for fear of talking in my sleep, 'cause if I dream about your memory, I just beg you not to leave. In the morning, don't bring mercy, no, not like you could do, when I'd only ever brave the day by waking up with you. 'Cause baby, I'm still learning how to lose you. Like the kickback from a smoking gun, takes some getting used to, and I can't unpull the trigger. No, I can't make you call. And these ghosts I treat like lovers, they aren't helping much at all. Now I'm months from where I started, and I'm no further down the road. And they said find yourself a new man, and I'm just doing what I'm told. But he's the dregs down in my coffee, he's bitter and he's cold. And yeah, he gets me out of bed, but man, it tastes like getting old. 'Cause baby, I'm still learning how to lose you. Like the kickback from a smoking gun, takes some getting used to, and I can't unpull the trigger. No, I can't make you call. And these ghosts I treat like lovers, they aren't helping much at all. 'Cause baby, I'm still learning how to lose you. Baby, I'm still learning how to lose you. Baby, I'm still learning how to lose you. Thank you. Ah, there you go. The guitar wasn't 100% in tune, but hopefully it was bearable.
It was really good. It was so nice.
Ah, thank you. You know,
Was
like
that, you say that was one you wrote yourself, or one that...
No, that was one from like there's a series called Nashville, and they had lots of amazing country singers writing on it, and that was from the last series. It was just kind of like, then there's loads of like really, so I could kind of quite happily be a Nashville covers artist because all of the songs are so beautiful and atmospheric and full of story. So yeah, I might like, cause I was going to do one of mine, but like that's easier on the other guitar that the string broke. So just got instrument issues tonight, haven't we, Mike?
Well, I'm afraid it's to do with being not very well organised tonight. I must admit.
I think that's fair. Shall we go? So I saw Omar popped in and then popped out again, but hopefully he'll be back. Should we go around again? Keith, have you got another story?
Yes, I've got another story. I've got
Lovely.
a very short one or a longer one. Which would you prefer?
Give me one that's long enough to get my headphones back on again. How does that sound? It takes a little while to redo the sound after that one.
No, I'll just do the short one. I think
No worries.
it's just a fun one, really.
That sounds
Well,
good.
there was a farmer, and he had children. He had this son, and the son, he just from way when he was tiny, loved tractors. The little dinky toy tractor when he was very small. He used to play in the sandpit with his dinky toy tractor and the trailer and maybe a little plough that I pulled behind it. And as he got older, he got a pedal version of a tractor. And he would pedal all the way around the yard, and he just loved being in his tractor. And as he grew up and he got older and older, and perhaps before he was maybe legally allowed to drive a tractor, Dad encouraged him to drive a tractor. And so he would drive the tractors, particularly maybe at harvest time when he was just drawing on the trailer when they were loading the bales of straw. A little bit later on, he got so that he could plough, and he used his tractor to plough the fields, and sometimes he would use the drag, and sometimes he would use a rotavator to work all the soil. But one day, as a young man, before I went to college, he was using his tractor and using a rotavator, and he was coming up to a dike, and unfortunately, the power of the tractor plus the momentum that the rotavator was causing as it was tilling the soil pushed him into the dike. Oh, and he was devastated. Put this tractor in the dike. But fortunately, his father was able to get another tractor and pull the tractor out. And after that time, he just didn't really want to drive the tractor. He went to college, and he came back at break time, during the breaks, during the holidays, and his dad would encourage him, go on, just, I need some land working. I need some work done with the tractor. But he just would not use the tractor. Just would not at all get on a tractor ever again. Now, one evening he went to the pub. And in those days, everybody smoked. There's lots of cigarettes and people spoke in pipes. And the whole of the bar was full of smoke. All the decorations around all the walls were all like that nicotine colour, as you remember. So that day, it was, and he went up to the bar and he went to get a drink, and there's a young lady there, and she was coughing, and she was spluttering. He said, "What's the matter?" She said, "It's all this smoke." He said, "Oh, just wait a minute." And he took a deep breath and drew all the smoke out of the bar. And he went to the window and blew it out of the window. And he went back to the young lady and she said, "How did you do that?" He says, "I'm an extractor fan."
Love it. That's beautiful. Where's that one from, Keith?
I just made it up. I actually drove it. I did have an accident with a tractor when I was working land with a rotavator. It pushed me into the dike, so that actually happened to me.
Oh my
But I
goodness.
still drive a tractor, and as Mike knows, I've got a grey Fergie, and I still drive a Fergie now. So it didn't put me off tractors.
Oh, well, that's good. I'm pleased. That's such a great story. Love it. Mike, do you have another tale or a tune for us?
Well, I will, but Keith, I was sat in the middle of Marrakesh at a cafe where we were having some lunch, and we were right up on the very top, and the guy from Iceland was there. What was his name? Was called Justin Huluga or something. Whatever
Oh,
his name.
yes. I can't remember
So,
his name now.
something like that. Anyways, he was there, and he's got a lovely, lovely, beautiful wife, and she was out there. And it's, you know, if you're from Iceland, sitting in the sun in Marrakesh is where I thought it was great. You must think it's absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
And somebody mentioned the word Land Rover, Keith, and I turned around and said, "Have you got a Land Rover? Because you know we've got a tractor and stuff." So we had a conversation about Land Rovers and tractors for about 40 minutes. His wife just put both her hands in her head and went, "No, I don't believe it." And we were talking about, yeah, he had a couple of old grey Fergies. He's got a Series 2 Mark 1. And I told him all about mine. I've got a 1947 old grey Fergie tractor. And I'm sure, Mir, you are really interested in talking about, listening about tractors. You're looking really fascinating. You know, you really are. You need to come and live in Shropshire a bit more, because we quite often sit and talk about tractors up here.
So your
And
thing
there's
is,
an old...
Mike, on your way to Sutton Hoo, on the left-hand side, like before you go straight on Sutton Hoo, tractor shop. It's like the most important landmark for every toddler in Woodbridge. There's just like loads of... So when you go to Sutton Hoo, don't forget to stop at the tractor shop.
Right, so the saying around here, Mia, is this: if you say 5 young farmers and they're all boys and they're all looking at the phones, or one phone in particular, they're not looking at some girl who hasn't got many clothes on, they're looking at a tractor. Okay, that's what they do, right? The girls, they'll be standing around with a phone, and all 5 of them will be looking in, and they'll be looking at something like, you know, Superman without his clothes on or something like that. The boys, they'll be looking at tractors, right? Not a problem at all. Okay, that Shropshire all over, that is. So I don't know. I'm just going to see if this can get this to work. Can you all hear that?
Yeah.
Can we all hear that? Right.
Yay.
Yeah, right. So this is a tune. It's called Not for Joe. It's if you go to Much Wenlock, it's called the Wenlock tune. If you go to Bishop's Castle, it's called the Bishop's Castle tune. You go to Ledbury in Herefordshire, it's called their tune. Everybody's got their own way of doing it. It's an old Morris dance, and it goes like this. Now, if you follow the River Wye as it comes into Hereford, just north of the bridge, there's a whole line of lime trees. And they're great big mature lime trees. They've been there a couple of 100 years, and they look spectacularly beautiful. If you go down there in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, as this year's going, whatever it is, when all the leaves just come out, they are spectacularly beautiful. And one day, just as the sun was going up, there was a young mother, and she decided she'd push her baby down through there. The baby hadn't been sleeping very well. And you know what a baby's like when they don't sleep and they're teething first thing in their lives. And she tried all the tricks that she could think of. Her mother had said, you know, take a couple of gins and then breastfeed it. That make sure it goes to sleep at night. You know, and 9 had said, put your finger in the whiskey with some aspirin and put it on there. But nothing had worked. But it just dropped off to sleep. And she thought, I'll put it in and the sun is coming up, and I'll just go down and walk back again, and then perhaps I can have some sleep, because she was a young mum with a first child, and she hadn't had any sleep for a couple of days. And just as she was going down there, a ghost turned up and went, "Ah!" and woke the baby up. Well, she was bloody furious. I don't know what furious is like in where you come from, Justine, in Suffolk or wherever it is, but she was more than furious. She went fanatic. She went to pick up this ghost. She grabbed it round by the neck. He couldn't grab hold of it. She just started shouting at it. This poor ghost folded. Stop me! Turned round and run off in the other direction. And she started running up after it, and there was this ghost going in one direction. This mad bloody woman that hadn't had any sleep for 3 days, who was a new mum. She went about 100 yards and turned around and went back to the baby, and the baby was still crying its eyes up. She picked it up. She walked straight into the cidery, just round the corner there. It's called Bulmer's. I don't know if you come across it. It's where they make a bit of cider from time to time. She walked straight in there where her husband was working, picked him up, chucked the baby at him and said, "You get the bloody thing to go to sleep," turned round and walked off. She gave one look at everybody, the foreman, the manager, the guys in charge of it, the security guard. They all looked and said, "It's got nothing to do with me. You married it. You go and sort it out. You can have the rest of the evening off." So he went home. His name was John, with the baby squawking its head off. Trepidatious was the feeling that he probably had as he walked into his little house, where he found his wife just shaking with anger. And she picked up the baby and she said, "You're not coming back here till you go and sort that ghost out." He said, "What do you expect me to do?" "Just go and sort the bloody ghost out." It was about 5 o'clock in the morning by now. He said, "Right." And off he went. So he went down there. Now, have you ever gone ghost hunting? Now, does anybody know anything about ghost hunting? I didn't know what to do either, but he was walking up down. All he'd said was she was about 4 trees down on the right. And finally enough, he stopped. He lit a cigarette, because everybody smoked back then. And he could hear this sobbing. And he turned round and tucked under a tree rope just above the River Wye, under the quay, there was this ghost crying its eyes out. He said, "I think I want a word with you." And the ghost turned round and went, "Is that bloody woman still about? Because I'm not coming out of here. And if that woman's round, I'm just going to run across the river, because you lot can't run across water like what I can." He said, "No, just stay here. She's back at home. She'll calm down in a day or so. Don't worry about it." Anyway, so what are you doing going round scaring all these mothers and babies? That's my wife and that's my baby. What the hell do you think you're doing? He said, "It's my job, innit?" He said, "What do you mean it's your job? What kind of job's that?" He said, "Well, I don't know. I went down and I didn't make it to heaven. I'm in the middle somewhere. And they said, I've got to come back and I've got to do this for about 10 years or so. And then they'll let me into heaven if I'm a good boy. And good boys means doing as I'm told. And they told me I had to come and walk up and down here for a bit." And he said, "Well, it's daylight just about. You come at night or you come at daylight?" He said, "No, I've forgotten how to go back. And so now I'm stuck up here. And I don't know what to do. And if that woman comes anywhere near me, I'm just about ruined. And I don't know what ghosts are like. And apparently, the only thing I can do is pretend to be someone's shadow." He said, "What?" He said, "You can pretend to be someone's shadow. If you're a ghost and you're hiding in the daylight, you pretend to be someone's shadow for the day. Just walk around behind them and make sure the sun's in the right place and no one knows you're here." And he goes, "Oh, I didn't know that." He goes, "Yeah, well, you know now." He goes, "Right. Anyway, I don't want to do that. I want to go back home." I said, "Well, what did they tell you?" And he said, "I had to go to the White Cross and I had to do something and say something and I'm hopeless at things. It's like a little poem or something." He says, "Come on then, let's go up to the White Cross." Now, the White Cross was put there and it's on the Welsh side of Hereford, between, as you come down the Golden Valley. So if you're leaving Hereford, you see a great big white cross and you look back before the cathedral and you know you're leaving a good, religious, honest place with a good Christian community and going into the wild pagan area of Wales. And if you're coming in the other direction, you'll see the White Cross, and behind the White Cross you go down to the cathedral and you know you're leaving where there's a whole load of robbing thieves called the Welsh and a pagan community, and you're coming into a good Christian community. It's the English side of the river, and you know you're going to be looked after properly. And so they built this great big white cross there. It's now on a council. It's on a roundabout in the middle of a council house estate. But it's still there to this day. It goes back to about 1700 years old or something like that. Anyways, so you go and find it. And he goes, "Well, come on then, what are you supposed to do?" And, "Well, there's a door here somewhere." "A door? So how do you find the door?" And he thought for a moment. He went, I know, he said. I've got to play a tune, but I can never remember the tune. Oh, he says, right, so tell me the tune. So he talked about it. And John went, I know that tune, he said. Give us your whistle. So he gave him the whistle. The ghost produced his whistle from somewhere, and it would have been a wooden one. Not a, this is an Irish penny whistle I've got here, but the tune's the same. And he went like this. And the ghost went, yeah, that sounds about right. And they looked round, and a rock moved one way, and a rock moved the other way, and a door emerged. And they looked at it, and in the door there was a keyhole. And John turned round to the ghost and went, you got a key? And he went, no, the key's the other part of the tune. The tune's the key. Play the other half of the tune. So he went, and out of the bottom of the whistle came a little wisp of air, and it just looked like a cloud. And as it got to the keyhole, it turned itself into a key, and it went into the keyhole, and it turned, and the lock undid, and the door slid open. And the ghost went, wow. And John went, wow. But the door started coming back again. So the ghost said, keep playing the tune. And he went, and the door sprung open again. And down from the door, there was 1,000 steps. And at the bottom of the 1,000 steps, there was a stream, and there were some spring flowers and some trees and a pathway. And wherever it went, it didn't go to hell. It went somewhere else, but it didn't go to hell. So John said to the ghost, go down those steps and keep walking, and your journey will take you way back to be. But whatever you do, don't come back here. And whatever you do, don't come and scare my wife and my child away. And he said, I promise. Whatever happens, I promise. And tell your wife I'm sorry. So off he went. And John, and just as he turned round, he went down about 10 steps. And he said, oh, there's another thing. He said, you mustn't cross the threshold. If you cross the threshold, you can't go back. Okay, he said, John, I'll just wait here until you've gone outside. Then I'll stand back and the door will close. And I'm going back. My shift's finished. I'm going back for my breakfast. Great. So that's what happened. So he started playing the tune. As he played the tune, the door held, and he watched him go down. And just as he was fading away, the ghost, he turned and he waved. And John, he went to wave again to him. As he just lost his balance. As he lost his balance, his foot slipped. And he went over the threshold, and the door closed. And he jumped backwards. But as he jumped backwards on his left foot, there was no foot. It was a footless foot. It was footless. And he looked at it, there was no pain. He just didn't have a left foot anymore. And he turned around and he kicked the door and he played and he played and he kicked the door and he played, but there was no way he could get that door open. And nothing could happen. So he hobbled back to his place. And he sat down and he told the wife the story just as I told it to you. And that was the last time he ever spoke. From that time, Footless John, he was mute. He never spoke, or he chose not to speak, or he couldn't speak. Nobody ever knew. But he lived his life for a long time. He was a grandfather, was Footless John. He was on his left foot, and he always played the same tune. Sometimes he'd go to the river, he'd sit down and he'd play a tune. He'd play a tune on a little whistle on the beach, on the bench. And the mothers would come down with the babies and they go backwards and forwards on the nice summer days and things like that. And they knew that there was no fear there. For they used to say in Hereford that a ghost looked round there, but when Footless John was there was no ghost. For something had happened, and all he could do was to sit, look at the river and play a tune. you go. Footless John.
Oh, that was lovely. And really sad as well at the end. It's like, oh, loved it though. I love the idea of like the ghost being scared of like a tired mum. That's fabulous. Where's that story come from, Mike?
The story comes from Hereford. It's upriver from the old Hereford Bridge. As you're coming upstream, the limes are on the right-hand side. And opposite now, there's a great big supermarket, but it's a bit further up. And it goes up to the White Cross there. And the White Cross is actually still there. But like I said, in the 30s, they built a housing estate down there. And it's in the middle of a great big council estate with a massive great roundabout. But the roundabout is 3 times as big as all the other roundabouts. So they did held it in that respect.
Yeah.
But no, it's an old story that I was with the Morris men back from Ledbury. And we used to go on a Thursday night, Justine, and I'm 70 now, so we're talking about in my early 20s. I was 22, 23, 24 those years. And we'd do dance in 2 pubs, and the third pub, we'd stay and they'd have a session and they'd sing songs and we'd drink cider and we'd all get pissed. And that was just the boys. The women used to come and join in as well. And one guy was in there, it was called the White Cross at Muckley, I think.
Yeah.
The pub was called the White Cross, anyway, I think. And the guy stood up and he picked up a penny whistle and he told a little story. He said, Footless John, this is Footless John. You're collecting stories, Russ. Why don't you tell this?
Wow.
So
that's great.
I collected quite a few stories. We're talking about 1970s now. You're talking about 77, 78, 79, things like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's the Hereford Book of Folk Stories that they did was the first one, and the guy who did it I didn't know. Otherwise, I would have told him that.
Yeah.
But, it was the very first one they did. So some of the Gloucestershire one, the Worcestershire one, the Shropshire one, I've got quite a few in from one way or another. And Amy,
it's lovely that been orally collected as well. It's just, I love that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And they still are, And the last time I heard it, when it wasn't connected with us, if you know what I mean, by us, the folk scene and everything else. There's a little primary school down there, and they did it as one of their plays for the end of term.
Oh.
And I remember thinking, well, the guy who told me didn't make it up then, because they started off, because somebody sent me the recording, and it started off by the headmistress, who was she didn't look like me, her skin was a different colour. She's saying this is a local story we collected off Nine's, whatever the little Abigail's Nine, and Nine is when you say nine in that context, it's nine means grandmother in Welsh.
Okay.
That's the word that they use for grandmother, like Nana.
Yeah,
it's
that makes sense.
Not grandma or something. It's the Welsh version of Nana is as close as you get. But if anybody speaks Welsh and contradicts me, they'll probably be right. Okay, but that's as close as I can get. My Welsh is pretty hopeless, but the person to ask would be Fionn Phillips nowadays. So
yeah, cool.
Anyway, how are you, Mike? How you doing?
That's brilliant.
And Andrew, nice to meet you, mate. I hope you enjoyed my little story. So.
Norman, I know that you couldn't stay for very long. Do you have a tale to share with us, my dear?
Yes, I do, actually. It comes from this time of the year.
Let me spotlight you. And Andrew, I'll pop you on next, yeah?
Okay.
There you go.
I have to clear my... Just let me get some water because...
Go for it. You can marvel at Norman's book collection while he's not there. Oh, it looks fabulous.
That's what the journalists do. If you ever sort of get interviewed by a journalist, what they do is they take a sort of screenshot, and then they go through your book of all your books to find out what kind of person you are and what reading you are and everything else.
Wow.
And so the joke nowadays is to put a whole load of porn books there. Right, and all stuff like that, and then they go, but it's always the one same book. I don't know which one it is because I'm not into that stuff. But apparently, you have one of those and you put it there, and the journalist, and see if you can catch a journalist out.
Just admiring your books in your absence, Norman.
Ah. Okay,
Real quick.
actually, I don't know which story to tell. One is
Oh.
about a bridge that's built by a hairy man from the forest, and the other one is all about a string of lies about how cold it was one spring. Which
I
one?
want the hairy man and the bridge.
Oh, okay. Have you heard that one before?
I have, so I want to hear it again.
Okay, then that's encouraging.
I
like that
like having
theory
people's
too.
greatest hits. Like,
But it comes from the Ottawa. It doesn't come from the Ottawa Valley. It comes further down upriver. In fact, you have to go all the way into Quebec, and not just into Quebec, but you have to go into the wilds of Quebec. Now, although I call it the wilds of Quebec, really, and along the St. Lawrence River, there was long, thin farms all along the way, called seigneuries. And the way they divided the land in those days was as each family inherited, they would get a strip of land. And so the farms got longer and thinner. But it was good land. And there's lots of people. And there's a village along the St. Lawrence River. And that village, well, it was a good village, but it had one problem. Every spring, the winter melt would come, the water would the snow would melt, and the water would come roaring down the river, and nothing could stop it. And so they kept on building their bridges every year, and every year the spring runoff took their bridge away, and they needed that bridge. It needed to go down river to get to the next town, to get all the things they needed, but there was the river washing it out. And so, well, one day though, there was a man. I like to see everybody, so I'm going to switch over away from the. Can I do that?
absolutely. Do what you want.
Yeah. Okay then. Oh shoot. Now, oh, there we go. There, and what's this? Now I'm just trying to figure out what I'm looking for. There. Okay, there you go. Now I
got
can
it?
see your faces.
Yeah.
So, anyways, same problem. Every winter, the high snows would turn into water and come roaring down and wash out anything that they'd built and more besides. Now, it was made known that there would be a reward if somebody could build a bridge of stone. Now, stone would be strong enough to withstand any spring melt, but there was nobody who had the money or the strength. Until one day there came from out of the forest somebody that people knew about, but they didn't want to talk about it, and that was the great, big, hairy man. He was a big man. He had hair here. He had hair everywhere. And he had a deep, growly voice that rumbled like thunder distance in the forest. He was known as the Big Hairy Man. And and he came into the village, and people saw him come into the village, and they shut their windows and they shut their doors, and they all peeked because he was a very curious creature, being a great hairy man. And he seemed to know exactly where he was going. He went past up to the mayor's house and knocked the door. Unfortunately, he wasn't very gentle at it, and the door broke into pieces. But the mayor looked through the pieces of the broken door, and he says, he was a brave man. Can I help you? I'm here to help you, said the great hairy man. I'm heard tell that you need a bridge, and you need to have it made of stone, and I'm the man to do it. Oh, that's very kind of you, said the mayor, but what's the price? Because there would be a price. Oh, it's a very simple price, said the big hairy man. I live in the forest, and I live alone, and I'm lonely. This is my price. The first person who walks across that bridge will come to stay with me in the forest as my friend and as my companion. And as you know, nobody wants to come live with me because I'm a great hairy man, but I'm actually a nice guy. So the mayor said, just a second, I think we might be, we'll see if we can help you, accept you. Well, why don't you come back tomorrow? And so the big hairy man said, I will be back tomorrow. And the mayor called the people together, and he told them the terms of the big hairy man, that a stone bridge would be built by him if somebody who was the first person to cross that bridge would stay with him in the forest because he was lonely. Now, nobody seemed to want to volunteer. But the next day, the big hairy man came into the village again. Well, he said in his booming village, do you meet my terms? And the mayor said, yes, we'll meet your terms, playing for time. But when you're finished the bridge, we'll talk terms then. So the great hairy man said, fine. And he set to work. Now, by upriver, there was a quarry. And in the quarry was enough stone to build that bridge. And the big hairy man, why, he just started hauling rocks. He just simply hit the rocks, split them into the right size, and carried them to where the bridge was to be built. And he worked fast. He was strong because he was a big hairy man. I like that phrase, I must admit. He was, and people saw him, and I must admit, more than one young lass watched how that big hairy man lifted those stones and broke the rock into the right size with his fists, and they admired the strength and the muscles, but nobody really wanted to mention it except whispered behind doors. So the work went quickly. Up went the framework, up went the for the stones. The stones were laid down, and in no time at all, there was a magnificent bridge of 3 spans. And the hairy man was on the other side, and he called, well, will you have your bridge? Do I have my price? And people looked at the big hairy man, and nobody wanted to go and stay with him forever in the forest. But the Mother Superior, I forgot to mention her, she says, don't worry, we have the price for you. And the hairy man said, where is it? And the Mother Superior came to one side of the bridge, and she had a big black cat in her hands. Where's the person who's going to stay with me? And the young woman said, Mother Superior said, the cat will. And she gave the cat a bit of a pat, and the cat just bounded across the bridge, as if it knew exactly where it was going. It came up to the great hairy man, and it leaped up into the air, and it landed right in his chest and curled up in his, and as people will do when a cat or a child leaps into their arms, they put their arms around the cat curled up in the great hairy man's arms as if he had been meant to be there all of his life. And as soon as the big hairy cat was in the arms of the big hairy man, the cat snuggled in and began to purr. And what a purr, a rumbling purr, a purr that filled the air with the sound of the cat. And there was the hairy man looking down at the cat, sleeping and purring away. And what did he do next? He laughed. He laughed and he laughed and he laughed, for he now had a companion, not the one he was looking for, but he had a companion. And so he turned around and he went back into the forest. And he was laughing so hard they could hear him laughing. And the cat was purring. And some said that the cat purred so loudly that it could be heard deep into the woods. But that's just a story. But so the hairy man had his companion. The cat went to live in the forest. And I'd like to say that that wasn't quite the ending of it. Because remember, I said that more than one lass noticed the strength, the gentleness, and the kindness of the great hairy man, especially when he had a cat. And so one day, one woman left the village and went into the forest, and the great hairy man wasn't lonely anymore. And that is the true end of my tale.
Yay. Awesome. I love that. I think-
Yeah, thank you. And the funny thing is that there's a lot of facts, in that kind of story, because that is a big problem in the rivers that all run into the Ottawa River, the other rivers along the St. Lawrence. When the spring melt comes, that water comes roaring down,
Yeah.
and it takes a lot of good, strong building and even then, every so often, well, let's just say that I'd like to say that the big hairy man had lots of work. Okay, then I gotta run. And
Oh,
eh,
thank you, Norman.
oh, thank you. And that's the tune from Much Wenlock. I heard that one here in Toronto when the Morris players have their Christmas revels. And so what is the title name of that song?
It's called Not for Joe.
What?
The tune's called Not for Joe.
Okay, well that.
Right. And it depends. If you're in the Welsh Marsh, which is where I am, or the Marsh de la Gauwaises, which is what the Quebecians would call it, it depends which bit you do first, because we only play one bit first and everybody else plays the second bit first and the first bit second, if you see what I mean. So it depends on where you are and who you play it. But it's a very old tune. It goes back, it's probably 1,000 years old. So.
Oh,
Wow,
Right,
that's
okay.
amazing.
okay. Oh, it's
So
nice to know a little more about it, because all I knew was that was part of the Christmas revels, and the Morris men would come up and with their sticks, and they would and they go whack, and bang, 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 bang. Yeah.
go. It's nearly
Hey,
in tune.
well, I'm
And
gonna
it's a
have to.
tune.
Right. So the second one is just as old as the first one, but the second one, Norman, is called the Much Wenlock tune. That is from
Ah.
when you were here. That is the Wenlock tune. That second one was. The
Oh,
first
that
one's
is
from the Welsh Marsh.
wonderful.
The second one. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. But I
It's-
don't know, Justine, have I got time for another little one?
Yeah, I'm going to let Angie do some poetry first, and then I'll pop you
Oh,
over.
sorry, I beg your
Yeah,
pardon. Yeah, yeah.
that's all
Okay, I'm
right.
gonna just say my goodbyes.
I know you got to
and,
run, Norman. Thank you
and
for
happy
coming.
spring, and don't let the runoff carry you away. But thanks very
You
much
won't.
for letting me share that story.
We'll see you next time, Norman.
Yes, take care.
Right, Andrew, let me spotlight you, my dear. There you go. You can unspotlight yourself if you want.
Yeah, Justine, my tablet hasn't got much charge left.
Okay, so go
So
quick.
if I cut out, I apologise. So I've
That's
just
all
got
right.
a couple of poems.
Go for it.
This one's called Traffic Light.
Lovely.
Traffic light. Waiting for the traffic light to turn green from grey. Is it another dry sky day? Writer's block isn't funny. Tell us about the money, honey, I said. Back from the dead, could be. My creative boat sails the Black Sea, sussing out a port, seeking to find land that original thought, whilst beneath the rind of life's fruity zest, my pen doesn't know best. I've tried rhyming couplets, the sentences just won't double it. I've died using internal rhyme out of my prime. I've sighed abusing alliteration. Oh, abomination. It's writer's block. Head for the chop. Cut the paper to shreds. What was it? My tired tongue said. And this is a narrative poem, and it's called Chip Shop Ballerina.
Yeah.
Chip Shop Ballerina. She worked at the chip shop. Men would pop in, vinegar in their eye, their peas all mushy, tongues not so much tied as twisted round their ankles. She was a legend on our estate, the face that launched 1,000 quips. Men would go on about portions, dreaming of asking for a large one. Busty, blue-eyed, big-hearted, cod, haddock, trembling on those lips. Back to my place, perhaps. Open or wrap, she'd ask, and many a lad would find their knees knocking like rocks falling from a volcano. It is hard to say the number of eruptions she caused round here. On Thursdays, when she worked the long day, gliding like a fast food ballerina, it was just like another Friday, men treading on each other's toes to ogle a glimpse. It was safe to say that the factory productivity round here the next day declined like a battered, broken heart. Oh, the batter. She died in a car crash on the way to one of the villages, a crossroads, they said. That evening, the queue went past the pub, something intoxicating in the air. Moths hung around streetlights like mourners looking for solace. Her picture appeared on the front of the paper, and that was it, for it seemed all the vinegar bottles ran dry that weekend. And was it just the vinegar that made the ink run? Her picture blurred like mushy peas on the tongue. It wasn't the same after that. The pub suffered, the off licence suffered, we all suffered. I still see her behind the counter, gliding, the fast food ballerina. Some say her ghost haunts, some say her ghost burns the batter, haunting the chippy like the smell of a fry-up. Buttered up, our rolls were. I'll have mine open, please.
Mm, I love that. Just so atmospheric and like,
Thank you.
and sad. Wow. Lots of
Thank
stories
you.
have been like kind of, they're really like, you kind of like really get into it. And then suddenly your central character dies. It's like,
Yeah,
I love it though. Thank you, Andy. That's awesome.
thank you.
Mike, did you say you had another one?
Yeah, well, it was one that sprung to mind because Norman was here. Now he's gone, this silly old bugger.
I knew he could only nip in, so.
Oh, right. Can I go back to putting it on view as well? Because I much prefer to see everybody as well.
Yeah,
Sorry, mate.
absolutely. You do what you need to do.
All I can see is myself staring back at me. So,
Now
if
you
go
take
and
it off.
find where the River Avon meets the River Severn, and we're talking about the River Avon, which is Stratford upon Avon, not the other ones, because Avon in the old Celtic languages just meant river. So, and where they meet is a place called Tewkesbury. And Tewkesbury, there's a massive, great big abbey, and it's famous for it's had a battle there. It's like all the other English towns. It's it's got a bishop and all sorts of stuffs there. But it's one of the most famous things for just there because there's a bridge there, and the bridge over the River Avon, which is the last of the Avon bridges, just before it meets the River Severn, is called St John's Bridge. And by St John's, there's a pub, and it's called the Black Bear. And the Black Bear is the oldest pub in Gloucestershire. That's what they say, because there's been a river crossing there. It used to be stepping stones, and then there was an old wooden bridge. And in the same way as in Norman's story, one spring the waters came down off the hills and off through Warwickshire and that, and it floods to this day down by there, knocked out the river. But it was just at the time of William the Conqueror again, and that old Duke and everything I was talking about before. And he came along and said, well, we'll build a new bridge. So he went up onto Breeden Hill, and there he found a grove of ash trees. And he sat amongst the ash trees, and he heard a tune. And the tune would have sounded something like this. He said, that's a lovely tune, he said, but I'm going to cut you all down and build a wooden bridge out of you. And the ash grove went, we don't want to be cut down. We like living here with the mother, the king and queen stone. We're a family. And you're not going to take us and our children and go and build a bridge. Go and build a bridge for something else. And the Duke said, if I want to build a bridge, yeah, I'll build a bridge, yeah, and I'm going to build it out of you. And he went home. But as he went to sleep that night, all he heard was a tune, Justin. You can imagine the tune, and he couldn't sleep that night at all. And then in the morning, he woke up grumpy, so he kicked the cat and shouted at the wife. And he tried to doze off in the afternoon, that didn't work. And And the next evening he had something to eat and he went to bed early and he couldn't sleep all night again. So he went and got his horse and he rode round on his horse and he was tired and did all the things we do when we're not sleeping at night. And in the end, every time he went on the third day, he woke up and he heard a tune. And he knew what he had to do and he went back and he went up onto Breeden Hill and he sat down. And there were men, he passed the men with axes and carts. And he said, hang on a moment. And he sat amongst the tune, and the tune came with the trees, and the trees came with the king and the queen stone. And he nodded and he turned back and he said, okay, men, he said, we're not going to build a wooden bridge. We're going to build a stone bridge because the trees don't want to be a bridge. And they all looked at him as if he was daft, but he was the Duke. But he went back and they opened up a quarry and they built a bridge. And it's the oldest bridge in the whole of the southwest of England. It's the one at St John's Bridge. It's the one that's at Tewkesbury, and it goes across the River Avon, the last one on the River Avon, and it's still there to this day. It was so good. And the pub's called the Black Bear, and I've sat in that pub. Many times I've sat in that pub. It's a beautiful place to take your family and now my grandchildren. And they say, tell us a story about the old bridge. And I said, no, what I will do is I'll take you to the King and Queen Stone, because that's still there up on Breeden Hill. And surrounded by trees. And that's why I like talking to trees sometimes, and that's a good place to go. Okay.
Love that. All the best people talk to trees.
You are when you're trying to be a forester.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, I hope it sounded half decent.
It did. It's lovely to hear it.
Been trying to get it so it's
I think it was more in tune than my guitar, Mike.
It was no bloody competition, Justine. That's for sure.
How out of tune can your instruments be?
Yeah, how out of it's only a folk session. How out of tune can you vote? I've got a feeling Mira over there plays instruments and she's laughing her head off with it.
Honestly, that guitar, that's why it's my second guitar. The one that's like I broke the string on, like as I was tuning up, was the first guitar. And the second one, it looks beautiful. It's got all this kind of beautiful pattern on it. I'm going to show you because they get so pretty. Look at this. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
It's like the most beautiful thing. It does not like staying in tune though. It's like you look pretty, you don't.
Yeah.
So you kind of start and you're in tune and it sort of disappears off. Shall we have one more story for me before we go? How does that sound?
Yeah.
Partly because I'm doing it tomorrow morning and I haven't told it to anyone. Yes, so you can buy my practice audience. Are you ready? I'm going to spotlight myself because I don't know why I find that less distracting. But anyone that wants to like not have me spotlighted, please feel free to change it over. So this is a story that I came across because I was basically looking for kind of more nature stories. I have lots of kind of nature stories, but they're all kind of a bit worthy. I wanted something that was kind of a little bit more fun. And so I was kind of researching and I found this, which some of you may know. It's a Japanese folk tale. And it made me smile a lot because it's so bizarre and so surreal. And it goes like this. Once upon a time, quite a long time ago, there was an old woman and she lived on a little cottage, just on the edge of a town, just near the woods. And she was known for being kind and generous to everyone and everything that came her way. And she didn't have much to give, but whatever she had, she shared. And the thing she was most known for was looking after animals. So if any animal had anything wrong with them, if a mouse had a whisker out of place, she would make sure it was put back. Even up to the biggest cart horse, if it had a thorn in its hoof, she would make sure it was looked after. And one summer, there had been a bit too much sun and not enough rain. And the water had not come and there was not enough for the animals to drink. And a badger had made its way into the forest a long way from its set just to try and find something to drink. And when the old woman found the badger, well, he was close to death. He was much the worse for wear. And so she picked up the badger and she took him back to her little cottage. And she fed him and she tended to him and she let him rest. And gave him a nice place to sleep until he was quite recovered. And once he's recovered, he turned to the old woman and he said, "Thank you so much for your kindness. I would surely have died without your help. Is there anything I can do for you?" And the old woman said, "Oh, of course not. I don't need any thanks. I don't need anything from you. Just seeing you well is what I live for." And so the badger said, "Well, thank you. Are you sure you won't take anything wrong?" The old woman said, "No, of course not." And the badger went about his way, but he kept thinking about the old woman and he wanted to do something for her. And if she would take it openly, then perhaps we'd have to be a little more discreet. And so he came back to the cottage, and from the distance, from the woods, he watched the old woman to see if there was any problems that she had that he could help with. And one day he saw her come out from her house talking to herself. She said, "Oh, such a shame. My old teapot is broken. Oh, I'm going to have to put it on the scrap heap over here. I won't be able to sit and have my nice tea of an afternoon now." Well, never mind. She never liked to complain about things for too long. She went back inside her house. Well, the badger, watching this, thought, "There is ancient badger magic I can do. I can help this woman." So the next time the woman stepped out to tend her garden, the badger came up to her cottage and jumped in through the window. And then, calling on the ancient badger magic, and I'll be honest, I don't know the ancient badger magic word, so we're going with Shazam. The badger said Shazam and turned himself into a teapot with the most beautiful steaming rose tea inside. And he sat himself upon her stove. So when she came back in from the garden, she thought, "Oh, I just fancy a cup of tea now." And then she looked on her stove, and there was a beautiful silver teapot where there hadn't been a silver teapot before. And when she smelt it, oh, she could smell the rose tea. She thought, "Oh, how wonderful, how kind of somebody." And she got out her favorite mug and she poured out a cup of rose tea. And when she tasted it, it was the sweetest thing. And she sat in her favorite chair and thought, "Well, I'm not sure where that came from, but I'm very grateful that it did." And the badger, who was now a teapot, smiled to himself. That night, she went out, and this is what she did every single night. She always made sure that she put a fire outside her house, and on that she put a bowl of stew, a nice kind of cauldron of it, so that any people coming past, any travelers, could stop and have something to eat as they went about their way. Now, normally it was travelers just going about their business, but on this particular night, there was two thieves that had been robbing in the town and were on their way to the next town. And they saw the old woman's fire with the cauldron of stew on it. And they thought, "Oh, free food." And so they sat down outside the old woman's house. The old woman came out and said, "Oh, strangers, you're welcome at my fire. Let me get you a bowl." And she got them two bowls and gave them the stew, and they started to eat. And she said, "Now, I always like to tell my visitors a story. And today I have the strangest story for you. And this one is a true story." And she told them the story of how when she'd come back in from her gardening, there on the stove was a fine silver teapot with the most incredible rose tea in it. And the two thieves, as they finished off their stew, listening carefully, thought, And they said, "Oh, well, maybe you should have some more stew." And she said, "Oh, no." I said, No, you've been working hard. You've made this fresh. You eat the more stew." And so they fed her and they fed her until, well, you know what it's like when you've had a big meal. She started to grow tired. And it wasn't long before she sat in that chair outside and she was fast asleep. And as soon as she was, those thieves tiptoed inside the house. And sure enough, they saw on the stove this beautiful, fine silver teapot. And they said, "We'll take that with us. That will add to our winnings from today, our stealings from today." Enough that's a word. But as they reached out for the teapot, to their amazement, the little feet of the teapot became little furry feet. The spout of the teapot became a long snout again. The handle of the teapot became a furry tail. And before they noticed, in front of them, the teapot had turned back into the badger. And the badger went, "How dare you treat this good woman with all of this, stealing her things?" And he started nipping at them. Nip, 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 nip. And they came running out, and they came running out, and they were making such a noise that they woke up the woman. And she said, "Oh my goodness, what's the matter?" And the thieves, frightened, said, Your teapot, it's a badger." Ridiculous. It's a teapot, not a badger. Oh, that's such a funny tale. Thank you for sharing. I said, No. Your teapot, it really is a badger. I said, "No, don't be ridiculous. It's just a pot of tea. Why don't you come inside and see it?" They said, "It's been biting us." They said, "No, come back in." And she took them back inside. And the badger had turned itself back into a teapot. She said, "Look, see, just a beautiful silver teapot. Maybe you're tired and you should be on your way to your bed." And the thieves a little confused, decided to go about their way. And the woman went back into her house and pulled up her covers and went to sleep. Oh, goodness, badger teapot. Well, the thieves had not got far through the woods when they realized, as valuable as a silver teapot would be, a silver teapot that turned into a badger would be worth infinitely more. And so, spurring their courage, they went back to the old woman's house. This time they'd brought with them a big sack. They were ready. And they climbed in through the window, the same window the badger had come in before. And they climbed over past the stove, and then they tiptoed up. What they didn't know was that the badger, when he was a teapot, could see just as well as when he was a badger. In fact, possibly better, because badgers sometimes don't see very well. And before they could do anything about it, they were trying to put the sack over, and he turned instantly back to a badger. And he started biting at the sack, and he bit his way out. He said, "Get out of here and leave this poor woman alone." And the thieves decided to cut and run. They went back through the window, headed out in the forest, and were never seen or heard from again. And the badger turned round, and he was just about to set himself back down to being a teapot when he noticed the woman, wide awake and staring at him. She said, You are actually a badger and not a teapot." And she said, "Are you not the badger that I nursed back to health?" And the badger said, "Yes, I am. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to deceive you. It's just that I wanted to do something nice for you, and you seemed to so like your tea, and when your teapot was broken." And the old woman said, well, it's the strangest thing I've ever seen, but thank you. It was really kind of you to do that. You really didn't need to. But oh, I wish I could show the world how I now have this badger that's a teapot and a teapot that's a badger. And then the badger had an idea. He said, well, why don't you show the world? You and I could travel around the place together. We could have a badger teapot show, and I would turn into a badger in a teapot, and that would entertain people. Would pay lots of money to see a badger turn into a teapot, which I think is the truth. And she said, well, what would be the point in that? And the badger said, but if we travel from town to town, you could help even more animals, and we could make enough money to come back here and retire and live happily with as many animals as wanted to come and live with us. And the woman, who had had led a quiet life till then, quite fancied the adventure. And she said, all right, then let's do it. And so they did. They set off around the whole of Japan, and in every town they stopped, and people marveled at the badger teapot and the teapot badger. And they paid good money. And after that tour and all the animals they helped along the way, they made enough money to come back to that little cottage and retire together. And they spent their time drinking the rose tea when the badger was a teapot, and looking after all of the animals that came to visit them. And they lived happily ever after. The end. Thank you. It's just the sweetest, strangest little story, and I love it. There's some really lovely kind of like Japanese painting. I don't know how old it is, but of this teapot badger. It's just the most bizarre concept, and I'm curious as to where it came from. But in the meantime, I'm just going to enjoy telling it. So that is all we have time for this evening. Goodness, it's gone fast. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to everybody that's kind of watching online. Oh, I've forgotten to put my PayPal in. Hang on, I'm going to put my PayPal in the chat now. If anyone's feeling generous and wants to donate to my virtual hat, hang on. Otherwise, I forget. But I'll put it on the post for the thing. Now, let me just put this down. Can't do two things at once. There you go. Absolutely no kind of obligation, but if anyone's feeling generous, then they can. Parish notices. What do I need to let you know? There is children's storytelling this Friday. I can't remember who's on this Friday. Does anyone know? If you have a look on the World Storytelling Cafe website, it will tell you. Mike, when's your next story round?
I think it's Sunday, isn't it, Keith?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Is it this
Yeah,
Sunday?
yeah,
So this
Sunday.
Sunday?
Yeah.
Another story round with Mike. And then we will be back here on, I think it's the 2nd of April, so the first Wednesday in April. But thank you so much for coming, and I will see you all next time.
Yeah.
Thanks for all the stories, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, bye-bye.
Brilliant.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Keith.
Bye,
Thanks,
bye-bye,
Claire.
bye-bye,
See you
bye-bye.
later. Bye.